Okay, let's take a look at the latest World War I game from GMT, 1914, Offensive outrance. It's the initial campaigns on the Western Front in World War I. This is the companion game, and I guess you could call it a companion game since it's a 1914 game from Michael Resch. The companion to, let's see if we can find it over here, 1914, Twilight in the East, which I played about a year ago. I did one of the C3I variants for it, and really the first monster game I ever actually played, and greatly enjoyed it. Very complicated, very detailed, very lengthy, and definitely a learning experience for me, and one that I really enjoyed. It sort of gave me the confidence to take on bigger and more complicated games than I might have ordinarily been interested in trying. I was really kind of intimidated by, the huge 2,000 counter 5 map monster games, and that one with its 38-page rulebook was daunting, but something that I approached with a very disciplined attitude and a diligent attitude of I'm going to learn this come hell or high water. And I did, and that pretty much led to acquiring a number of other monsters that I've played over time. You see there's OCS there, which I haven't gotten to yet, but and No Longer Afraid of, War of the Suns, some of the great battles of the Civil War, Last Chance for Victory there, and This Terrible Sound, both in the Line of Battle series, also some monsters. Got a couple of the AWE games there, Europa Universalis, maybe not quite a monster game, but certainly probably the most daunting game in terms of rules that I have on my shelves. And then up here, not so many monsters up there. The American Revolution games aren't too huge. Probably the real monster up there will be Charlie's Year from Red Sash Games. That one's going to be complex. That's part of the Lace Wars series from Red Sash. A not quite so familiar subject for a lot of people. And then up on the top shelves there, we've got the Ancient World series. Again, size-wise, those aren't quite monsters, but very complex in terms of rules. Otherwise, that's really about it in terms of the big monster games. No huge World War II monsters for me. I'm not really a big World War II guy, although I do have some World War II games playing. In fact, right now, playing the Dark Valley over there, which you can't really see because of the glare. Anyway, back to Offensive outrance. We will take a look inside the box here. Big, heavy, sturdy box. I've already popped the lid off of it. I thought initially it was one of those titanium boxes like the Commands and Colors or the Combat Commander box, which sort of have a lighter colored interior. This has that kind of chipboard look to the inside, but feels a lot sturdier than, by comparison, the older 1914 Twilight in the East box, which is that kind of thinner cardboard. So same color though. So I guess GMT has a number of different levels of box strength that they go with, but this one certainly is heavier than the previous entry in the series. Just a moment to talk about the actual cover artwork. This is a fairly by GMT standards, a fairly minimalist cover. Especially when you compare it to what we saw on the previous game, which is this is much more what I would consider classic Roger McGowan cover artwork, in that you've got a collage here of, I don't want to say period artwork because I don't know, or period photographs or whatever, because I don't know if these images are actually from the period or if they're illustrations based on photographs. That certainly looks like it was a photograph. Really, most of these do, but they all have sort of effects work done to them. So I don't know if that's something Roger McGowan did, or if he pulled these from various publications or books where this sort of illustrative work on a photograph had already been done. But this is definitely much more of what I would consider a classic Roger McGowan cover. The sidebars using assorted imagery there. Whereas here on the West Front version, Offensive Outrance, you just have the one image centered in the box. Very non-flashy font, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't know exactly what font that is. It's maybe not Times New Roman, sort of looks like it. The 1914 is in that same style font as the other game was, not quite as big. But no real decoration, anything else around just the single picture here in the center, which shows looks like a French assault, and they've all got the kepis on, so it appears to be period appropriate for 1914, where the French were not yet wearing the French fireman helmets that we tend to associate with the French army in the trenches in World War I. This is 1914, dealing with pre-trench warfare in World War I. So, I tend to like Roger McGowan's work. In recent years, he's focused more on doing period artwork. A lot of times just a single image of some artwork that's period appropriate or subject appropriate to the game that he's doing. And that trend has sort of continued here, where he's taken, rather than doing a collage of images that may or may not be from the actual time period, he's taken an image. And again, I guess I don't know exactly when this image was done. Was this done after the war, or was this, it's a very expressive painting. I doubt this was based on a photographic source. Just from the composition of it. So it may have been something that was done after the war, that's added some drama, some action and drama to the picture. May have been done in a post-war publication, but entirely possible that it could have come from during the war too. But either way, this seems to be in keeping with his recent trend of doing less of the collage artwork that you see on a lot of his older works. I'm thinking specifically in terms of, a good example here, I guess, would be any of the Battles of the American Revolution games, where you've got, this sort of assembly of these various printed images. Monmouth, kind of the same way, more printed work. A classic example here would be Wilderness War. Where you can see this is just like an assembly of different images. Whereas more recently, you get things like Serpents of the Seas, where this was from 2010 maybe, so yeah, in the last 5 years or so. You just have a single painting there in the center. Or here, a good example from last year, one of my favorite covers from last year, Iron and Oak, where you get this just gorgeous lithograph of chromolithograph of the Monitor and the Virginia fighting. And I think actually the most recent release that just came out this past month, Blood and Roses, where again here you got the single image in the center. He's done some color work. This is another, not a chromolithograph, but a engraving from, I want to say, like the mid-19th century of the Battle of Bosworth. I particularly love engravings, so I really am fairly fond of that cover. But that's been the general trend, is you've gotten these kind of single image, period appropriate artwork type images, as opposed to the collage type stuff. So anyway, long rambling commentary about the artwork on the box, but you know, Wargame artwork is something that I tend to like focusing on. So I particularly liked this cover. Some people might think it's kind of plain, but I think the image is just very striking, very dramatic. Although I do have to say, like, the quality of it is not the best. There's a certain fading to it, so I'm not sure what the source was or if that was intentional on McGowan's part. But it looks more like a sketch that's had some color added to it. But still very striking, I think, and very, very dramatic in terms of the action that it's depicting there. The sort of, I don't know, just lots of movement and violence to it, which is what you think of 1914 and World War I. This was prior to the trenches. You had these massive armies doing massive movements. And so even the title there, Offensive Outrance, which is offensive to excess, the French term for what their initial plans were for 1914, which, again, I like the French point of view here. When you talk about 1914, you almost always just think of Schlieffenplan, and it's all German, and it's all Germany swinging through the Low Countries and kicking France back on its heels. You never tend to think or hear about World War I from sort of a French offensive perspective, but the French did indeed have offensive plans for World War I. They just didn't get to make very good use of them. Anyway, let's take a look inside the box. Got our typical GMT slip here. Enjoy the game, so forth. Rulebook. The rules for this are going to be different than Twilight in the East. Michael Resch has talked about streamlining the rules and making, I think, a little bit less die rolling. The rules on Twilight in the East had, for combat, you were making so many different die rolls per combat because you were tracking not only combat losses but also combat effectiveness and morale. So you had lots of different things you were tracking for units, which I thought was great in terms of realism, but incredibly cumbersome in terms of moving quickly. But you know, it's a monster game, so you're going to get that kind of work. And despite the streamlined claims of the rules, the rulebook itself is not actually any shorter. Still clocking in here at 40 pages. So they'll still be thick, but hopefully familiar enough that I won't feel like I'm relearning the entire game. We got 4 dice in here, black and white dice, nice big GMT dice. I usually don't keep the dice with my games. They go in my dice mug, which is right now just a Starbucks mug. Game turn record track. The last game, there were errata on the game turn record track, so I ended up printing out a new version of it from the GMT website on cardstock. Hopefully this one won't have those issues. I guess we'll see. Anytime I can avoid having to print out, quality collateral stuff like this, I prefer it. But as you can see, that's a whole sheet just of the turn track, and lots of stuff on there. And you will have, this is the kind of thing, which is good, I think. For some games, they have the turn track on the map. For a game like this, where you're going to have giant stacks of reinforcements probably taking up a lot of these spaces, it's good to have its own card. Just keep it out of the way of the map. You can set it on a separate table or something like that. Here are the player aids. Got here terrain key, terrain effects chart. Ooh, there we go. Combat results table. You can see that okay because of the glare. Getting some glare here. It is not a small CRT. This doesn't look quite like the one from Twilight in the East, so I imagine there's been some changes there. But hopefully fewer steps overall. bombardment result. Bombardment prep, artillery. On the back here, movement points, stacking limits. Dense. Dense with tables. It's a sign of a monster game. Another player chart. In fact, there's 4 of these, which is nice because monster games, a lot of times, it's not going to be 2 people playing. You're going to have teams. So here, 4 players. In fact, I think this game was specifically designed so that 4 players could play the entire campaign during the full week of Consim World, which is the Wargaming convention in Phoenix. I'm sure most Wargamers know about that. Or is it in Phoenix, Tempe? I don't know. Somewhere in Arizona. Counter sheet 1. I think there's... We are looking at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 counter sheets. So I think Twilight in the East had 8 counter sheets. So there might be more counter sheets in Twilight in the East. But as you can see here, these are all the French counters. They look very similar to the Twilight in the East counters. Not exactly the same. Seems to be less of a color scheme to these. If I remember, there were more. There's the Cav. That looks similar. I remember more of a color scheme involved. Oh, there's the color scheme. That's right. So I'm thinking that goes to the organizational trackers. Yeah, there we go. Different colors in the different units. Not sure what the ones that I was looking at. Those must be garrisons and things like that. So yeah, there we go. The color scheme here, yeah, very similar to Twilight in the East. So that's the first counter sheet. You can see on the back, some of them don't have anything on no steps on the reverse for some of these. More allied counters here. And for Belgian units, British units. Not many of those. Germans, the classic German gray. And they are more gray here. It's interesting. On Twilight in the East, the German units are that really sort of greenish color. So I'm not sure if that was intentional. Maybe people felt like they weren't German enough in Twilight in the East, or maybe if they had that greenish tint to them, they'd be too close in color to the blue French units. So 2 sheets of Germans, 2 sheets of French. That's about what you'd expect. Looks like fortresses there. Lots of info on those counters. And then we've got markers here. Twilight in the East did not use these combat effectiveness markers. You actually tracked combat effectiveness on card tracks that were off map. And there's prepared attacks. I've heard that this version or this game doesn't have the victory points for prepared attacks like Twilight in the East did, which I thought was too bad. Really, I kind of liked the fact that you got victory points for prepared attacks because it encouraged people to attack when they might not otherwise have done so, which seemed very much like World War I to me, where you would seize the initiative by attacking, and you may lose a lot of guys, but you'd start racking up victory points that your opponent would have difficulty responding to. Here's various other fortification markers, bridge markers, railheads for your supply, and so forth. And the last sheet of markers here for our supply. Oh yeah, movement points expended. Those are sort of the rotating counters. That's very similar to what Twilight in the East had. That's all the counter sheets. I guess there are other. Got these here, which are your army markers. Done. The Twilight in the East had cardstock army combat effectiveness trackers, and I think this does these little, these you can actually punch these out, and they sit on the map near the actual army. Just kind of keeps them in view so you can track your army effectiveness easier on the map. I think this is a great innovation compared to what Twilight in the East had, where everything was done on these cards that were off map. You know, so you kind of have to tend to that after all the movement on the map, and it sort of kept things separate. Whereas here, you can do it all together. And so I'm not sure. I think these markers you can use to adjust which armies you're referring to on those cards, but I may be wrong there. As you can see, there's several sheets of these nice cards. And they probably have a term for them in the game. I just don't know what the actual game term is for these on-map tracking cards. And last but not least, we've got the maps. I may stop the video and just lay these out on my floor just to give you an idea of how big they are. That's what I did with the Last Chance for Victory. It wouldn't be a monster game without a playbook. Now the playbook for this seems much thinner than the one for Twilight in the East. It does have 28 pages, but the setup grids are different. Twilight in the East had these setup grids that you'd have to turn it this way, you know, to read the grids sort of lengthwise. So these setup grids don't look nearly as sort of dense and intimidating as they did in Twilight in the East. So we'll get some designer's notes there at the end. So there we go, that's all that. And I will lay the maps out and we can take a look at those. Alright, here's all the maps laid out. There's 3 maps. There's a sort of an east and a west map, and a south map. I think Twilight in the East had 5 maps, but that was a much larger front than what we're dealing with here. So I'm not sure how the lighting is here. I had to, getting late in the afternoon, I had to flip my lights on, so I was afraid it'd be too dark to make anything out otherwise. But you can see here, there's Paris. And the design of this map is very similar. The iconography is very similar. I think the trees and elevations are different, slightly different colors, slightly different style. But like city hexes and fortification hexes and things, the iconography looks the same as it was for Twilight in the East. Just forests are done a little bit differently. I actually liked how they were done better on the Twilight in the East map, which I thought was just a gorgeous map. But you know, this is also still a very appealing map, very functional. I think very clean, or at least clean in terms of it's clear what things are. You know, you can tell where your rail is. The things aren't confusing against each other. You know, roads aren't overlapping rails in a confusing way. Forests and swamps and things aren't dominating the scenery on the map in a way that makes things difficult to identify or understand. So I think it works very well. And you can see here further on the south map, you kind of get into some more mountainous terrain. And over onto the closer to the German frontier, there is the Compass Rose. Another one's over there. You can see there's Belgium, got Antwerp, Brussels. All along there, the western front, where they will be engaging each other. Bauge, Lille, Arras, there's Calais up there, and I know the Race to the Sea is definitely something that will be happening in the game, so there's probably a scenario in there specifically for it. So at some point that front's going to be extending out to these coastal hexes. British Expeditionary Force will be in there somewhere. So you've got your, as you can see, your east map, your west map, and there by the leg of the tripod, the south map. And the south map actually significantly overlaps. You can see here, significantly overlaps onto the east and west maps. So, compared to Twilight in the East, not quite the same level of table space needed on these. So, this one won't have as big a footprint. And the other main aspect that saves space compared to Twilight in the East is that you won't have those Army Effectiveness tracking cards, which you really need a whole separate table for in Twilight in the East. Here, you're going to have all that tracking stuff right on the map, so behind your front lines and so forth. So, I think the economy to the design of this game is much better compared to that of Twilight in the East. So that's pretty much a look at the game. That's inside the box. That's the maps all laid out. I look forward to getting this one to the table.